Hello, everyone. This is Heidi Hayes Jacobs, and I'm delighted to spend some time with Nancy Lhoest-Squicciarini. And I'm just delighted to have you here to share your thinking and your ideas about our book that Allison Zamuda and I wrote and is now out in the press, and that's the ASCD book, Streamlining and Storyboarding the Curriculum. And what we're working on today is a conversation to listen to a leader, a prominent leader in the world of international education and also general education, who has 35 years of experience and who I'm absolutely delighted is joining us here. Nancy is based in Luxembourg. She does extensive work with ECIS, the Educative Collaborative of International Schools, and works with schools all over. And I've had the good fortune of being in sessions that she has facilitated, and I know she's an extraordinarily good and insightful listener and presenter and a good coach. So Nancy, tell us a little bit about your work right now. Thank you.
First of all, Heidi, it's such a privilege to be here. Hello, everyone. I just retired after being in education. I was able to retire from the International School of Luxembourg. I was there for about 31 years, and I taught in New York for about 5 years. So just recently I retired, and now I'm thrilled that I'm working for ECIS, like you mentioned, which is a very innovative and collaborative organization looking at making impact in international education. I just love the CEO. Her name is Cam, and she has just brought a new light to the organization, and it's one that fosters really the idea of professional learning, regardless of boundaries. And I've been really privileged to work with so many schools because of ECIS in terms of curriculum, group dynamics, and teaming. And what's lovely, I work in my home, so I'm in my attic right now, but then I also do a bit of travel to visit schools. So I have the best of both worlds. So I can sit in my attic, but then I also get to travel. So it's been a thrill to be able to join their team. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure, Nancy. This is an opportunity for us to explore, and for me, I want to talk to key leaders about our book and the ideas in the book. And ASCD is really supporting the launch of the book, and we are extremely grateful for that. But now that it's out there, Alice and I are really curious, kind of listen and pick your brain a bit. So Nancy, I want to find out just on a basic level, when you read the book, what concepts caught your attention?
Well, what I really enjoyed initially was just some of the formatting of just formatting. For example, rather than using the word chapter, you used episode. And I just love that, because episode to me is like, it shows that it's interconnected, like that, there's a line or a thread going through each one, because chapter to me can be a silo. So I thought that was such a different way. I never read a book that had episodes. So I thought that was just in terms of format. And I also love, I'm going to go more literal before I go. I love that you started off with the idea of starting with these learning targets. Like, it already put my mind saying, okay, this is how you're going to channel your thinking. And then always having those 3 verbs. It was like engage, examine, and act. And that set up the structure for how I knew I was going to unpack what I was reading. So for me, between the episodes and the way you started each one of those episodes, I found it embraced me, my mindset, and how I learn. The other concept that I thought really caught my eye was your use of imagery, like the lantern. I love that analogy. You said the lantern of curriculum, and I was like, what a great idea. So I imagine a lantern leading the light of how students will learn. I think another one you mentioned was the idea that curriculum was a rooted path versus a well-worn track. Love that. And I think all that imagery allowed me to really get into your mind of what you were thinking about how you wrote the book. And I love imagery. I think it creates images in your mind. There's pictures in your mind that allows you to connect. Another one I love. You talked about librarians weeding the collection. That was brilliant, because you ever go into a library, you pull a book from like 1743, but it really shouldn't be a book still on the shelf. So them literally looking and going through that process. So for between the episodes and your imagery, I thought was brilliant. And that it was a read that it resonated with me because of how you organize it, but then the terminology and how you organize that type of wording to allow, this one I love because I've done curriculum for not as long as you, but design amnesia, that you're just literally, that was brilliant. So I think for someone reading it, the imagery caught me. That was something that really grabbed me from the start of reading the book.
Nancy, I'm delighted. One thing about the way we did that and how wonderful it is you caught that right away is we felt we needed to model the very thing we were talking about. And if we're talking about curriculum as narrative and being deliberate in the storyboarding of it, then we needed to do that too. And here's something I'll just say. We wondered if ASCD would go along with this. I mean, they publish books, classically written and beautifully developed books with some very, don't get me wrong, far reaching ideas, but the style, the format, and they were keen on it. They liked it. They couldn't have been more supportive. So it was an opportunity for us to do the thing we were talking about, and I really appreciate your picking up on that. In the book itself, the titling has the streamlining, and then it has the storyboarding in the tagline. These are the two big concepts that we see are quite married in many ways. But if we could start with streamlining for a moment, and I'm going to just ask you, do you think there's a need, let's go with international schools, we're dealing with this question of a bloated, sometimes very overwhelming curriculum in terms of both the amount and the nature of it, as well as the formatting question. Do you see there's a need for streamlining in international schools?
First of all, I'm so glad ASCD embraced the way you've organized it, because I really did exemplify what you wanted the reader to experience in terms of curriculum design. So I felt there was alignment between that. So yay for ASCD, you're there. Right. I was an assistant principal. One of my roles was I was responsible for teaching and learning. Right now, I feel like educators, they have, and I think use this word, they have unit fatigue between the volume of knowledge, dispositions, the templates. It's overwhelming, number one. Number two, I think it's about, did we forget the purpose of curriculum? Like who's the audience? And I think because so many schools are standardized, and it was a challenge, they're using external, they have to take in every aspect of that curriculum, but we're forgetting to take 3 steps back. What's the purpose, and where is the student within this curriculum? And we're just getting boggled down with so many standards. Like, how many super standards can you have? It's overwhelming. And the teacher is now getting a bigger role when you think about COVID, just COVID alone. The teacher is no longer just academic. It's also social, it's emotional, it's well-being. And her role has increased. And COVID also did the other thing, I think, as you mentioned as well, it highlighted how jammed our curriculum is right now. Like, it was impossible. Looking online, they realized, we only have 14 to 18 standards. 47 standards for this one unit. It's not feasible. So yes, to go back to your question, I totally agree. The streamlining is essential, and looking at how do we make it where it goes back to one of your analogies. If the student is, where's the student in this journey? And they have to be in the center of this journey. And right now we're getting lost in templates, and you've seen it with all your work that you've done. I mean, this is something I know you've spoken about so much with when you've done curriculum mapping, your books that you've had previously.
Yeah, I think, you say it really clearly. I guess I'm assuming you would say the same thing is true in all schools, international schools. And international schools, for those who haven't worked in those environments or had an opportunity to, many of them deal with curriculum that is based on another country as well. Like many of the American schools abroad deal with US-based curriculum, though in the United States, it's all based on the state you're in.
Right.
And so there's variations in demands, but I think almost without exception, I really haven't heard anyone yet, and I'd be curious to hear from people who say, "Oh no, we're just fine. We have all the time we need, and the curriculum is, hunky dory."
Right.
It's a pretty well understood problem, and I was curious to hear from you about that. I have another question that was really interesting to me, and it's actually what immediately brought you to mind when I was thinking about who did I want to interview for leaders. And just for the record, I plan on interviewing a number of them, but you were the first one out of the gate. I really want to interview you.
Oh, you're kind.
Well, also teachers like you and school personnel like you. You really have a flair.
Oh, you're kind. Thank you.
You're welcome. But you posted, I don't know if it was on LinkedIn or on Twitter or you posted that you were intrigued with our elaboration and our discussion on the 4 conditions for authentic assessment, and that we had been wrestling with this question of authenticity, which is a word that is now, it's starting, people go tone deaf on that stuff. You can start to go, but we were saying, what does that look like? Especially since we wanted to create experiences that students would see as demonstrations of learning that are real, that are relevant. And so we started to play with those conditions. I was curious why that caught your attention and the need that you see for that. That intrigued me. I was so happy to see you do that.
Oh, you know what? I think it's because of maybe my experience in international schools. So you have people from different experiences, different cultural backgrounds come to one international school. So then they look at and they say, well, how do we look at assessment? The school needs to create their guidelines, their protocols, their structures, or their principles of assessment according to that organization. If not, people create their own silos and do whatever practice they want without realizing the impact on the entire learning ecosystem. So there was this book I read, which was by Andy Buck. It was Leadership 3.0. And I love this book because he talked about that culture is the way we do things, which we know. But he says it relates to the procedures, the protocols and practices you have in place. So what resonated with me was, can you imagine if a school used your 4 questions? Every single member of staff had to use those 4 questions when looking at authentic assessment. That would create a culture because the behaviors develop around those protocols. And it would be almost, and I know some people don't like this with curriculum, it's a non-negotiable. When you're looking at assessments, these are the questions that are the springboard for discussion. And I used it with the school. And I said, listen, I just read this book. You're looking at how do you get conversations that focus on authentic assessment? Get the book, use a book study, and use these questions. And that creates that culture. And that's what I felt moving from so many international schools. They needed these prompts, but these prompts are consistently used throughout the whole school. And I love them. I mean, you had another set of questions about, what was it? How do you edit curriculum? You had like 3 or one of those. I love that. It just creates that consistency in conversation. And then different perspectives can be added based upon those questions, which are foundational to that organization. And I thought that was so powerful. Loved it.
I'm glad that you raised that. I think one of the things that we are really advocating for in the book is a decided shift in the way teachers perceive themselves. We see them as creative writers, as composers. It doesn't mean they are the ones who invent, a new field of science. It means that you are making choices in telling the story of algebra across a year, or rocks and minerals in 2nd grade, whatever it is you're working on. And in orchestrating those decisions, you need to kind of have an editorial eye. You need to really be thoughtful about your choices. So when we had been working on authenticity and assessment before we started the book, it was an earlier sort of set of precepts we'd been playing with, and people responded, well, a lot of folks said, oh, it's authentic, it's an application, but it was an application that was really more of a rehearsal. It was like a in class sort of thing. But authentic, what are the conditions? What are
exactly,
and so with that editorial eye, if you're laying out your curriculum and you're being deliberate about the sequence and the story you're creating and the genre and the setting, and then you're looking at what it results in, you've got to keep, a standard of like what makes, just like you would say, what makes an excellent ending to a story or an arc. It doesn't mean you're all doing it the same.
Exactly.
There's conditions that make it happen. So hearing you, I'm feeling like that came through for you. But what thrills me the most is you took it to schools and did they respond well?
They did, because I think you just said it so beautifully. It's like, it's creating a framework. It's creating that you have your own perspective, but the questions provide that, like I said, that springboard for conversation that's consistent. It's not saying everyone has to do it the same, but it's just getting those discussions focused initially. And I think that was such a strength of the book, was providing those frameworks, but then allowing that freedom for innovation and creativity, which was beautiful. But then still knowing, like you just said, this is the beginning of the story, this is the middle, this is and I thought that was, for international schools, that framework is a necessity. More so because you have so many cultural experiences and diversity within the staff that you don't have those similar, I would say, I'll give one example. One time I was talking to my 6th graders and I went like this: go home. And some of the kids look at me like, what is she doing? They never saw E.T. So that was my cultural framework. And they looked at me. So imagine a group of teachers, you have 250 staff. Your book provides that framework for those discussions that becomes part of that organization, that learning ecosystem. So whoever comes in, this is how we talk about authentic assessment or editing curriculum. And I think that is something many schools are looking for right now.
I like the way you put, I really do. And I loved your example of the ET. And for the really young teachers, you won't know what we're talking about. I think the thing that you're reminding me of as leaders is we sometimes make assumptions about actionable terms. So you'll hear a leader with good intentions say, we want authentic assessment. But if everyone is sort of operationally defining it differently,
exactly,
it doesn't seem to me, the concept isn't that you're telling, it really is creative writing. You're not telling everybody how to write, but you were making it clear that we've got to be clear on the term of what a plot is. We've got to know what setting means. We've got to know what characters mean, so that you can then create an environment with a freshness and voice. And so we want teachers to bring voice. They need to. And the student voice is who it's all for. The client. So I think you've said that really well. There's something else I want to get at, and that is, this sort of leads naturally to it, is a big part of the book was thinking of curriculum as narrative. And not in just that's a nice analogy, but quite literally as narrative. So in the storyboards with the images and the layout, we're being very deliberate that connective language occurs across the board. And what was startling for me is I feel on some level I contributed to the problem in my career. I'll own it. No, I really will. Yeah, I will. And that is that we really got good at designing really good units, but they were often siloed.
Right.
And so without deliberately explicating the connective language, we made an assumption that students would see the connection in all those units in physics or in ELA. They don't. And a big part of it was making that shift, but also liberating ourselves to get into the idea of rediscovering the story in the curriculum. Did that come through to you? I hope.
I did. I love the idea of the story. The story touches everyone's heart. You
Mm,
can have a group, I just think the idea is about emotion. It's human contact. And that's what I love when hearing about your story, the concept of story. In Luxembourg, I would always, when I changed positions, I became head of community relations, and I met with new families. And they're coming from around the world. We have 56 different nationalities. And the first thing I had them do was talk to one another about their transition to Luxembourg. What
mm,
was it like to be in Luxembourg? And you would think they're Korean, they're Japanese, they're French. That storytelling connected them. So when I saw it in your book, it resonated with the power of storytelling and
mm.
also putting those kids in the center. I think we forgot about the kids in some of our curriculum design, their voices, their agency. And that's what I loved about, I think you used the expression, they're heroes in the story.
Yeah.
And that came out very strong. I mean, that to me was just touching my heart. I was like, oh, this is what we want the curriculum to be, to let them know that they are leading this journey. And I thought that was done beautifully. Like that to me,
Yeah.
the stories, it was just beautiful. Sorry, just love that part.
No, but I want to do a tip of the hat to Allison on that. She was such an advocate for making sure we kept that language clear and in the forefront. So here's to you, Allison. It got through.
You made those connections. You definitely made, for me, just personally, you made those connections. Definitely.
Well, that
Definitely.
kind of also points to the storyboard layout. You kind of mentioned to this before, so I don't need to, you don't need to say too much more about it. But if you want to, I loved how you called out right at the get-go of our conversation the use of the imagery, the iconography, student-friendly language, clarity on terms, rewriting so we don't spend so much time working through more officious types of bureaucratic documents
Yes.
or filling out templates that are rather tyrannical, but
Mhm.
rather really like writing it directly for who it's for.
Mhm.
And you said right out of the gate that got your attention. That
Yeah. And the I statements. How beautiful was that?
yeah.
How many times do you see curriculums with I statements? I mean, I have to say, in my experience, I've worked the school I was at, we didn't use I statements. It's so powerful. It resonates. It puts the child in the center of it and makes that individual reflect on their learning because it's written in the first person. So I thought that was very powerful. Haven't seen that within the curriculum that I've been reading about or even using within schools.
I think one of the things, and build on that, what we wanted to do was take the idea of where you do see ICANN learning targets as almost always specifically with standards.
Right.
And I wish more schools did this. I do see work emerging more and more where you unpack your standards and convert them into the ICANNs. But it doesn't always make its way directly into the curriculum. So I'm glad you picked up on that because if a student, it's one thing to be taught at, like
Right.
you want the skill to be, you want students to be able to, which is always the word
Yes, the wording.
opening, um, uh, make inferences about informational text.
Mhm.
But
What
it
is
says I can infer ideas from the text. I can make a
so
punch
powerful?
about, the point here is then they're doing it. They're the player. And so
Absolutely.
I hadn't thought about it that it's not, I think the standards thing I've seen, but you're quite right. The curriculum itself, it sometimes gets
Oh,
lost.
and it's so nice that it was written I can with positive intent rather than many times they say the children will describe future tense, but I can, it's happening right now. And I thought
Yes.
that was powerful as well.
Well, let's go a little bit to a little bit broader look at. You work all over. You work with schools literally all over the world. I know you do, and you travel all over too. And I'm just wondering, apart from anything we wrote or just in your experience, I could pick your brain a little bit about what you think are some of the critical issues facing international schools right now in a world that is going through a great deal of stress and pain and should be absolutely acknowledged. what are some of the things you're seeing or challenges, Nancy?
Such a good question. My husband he just retired. He was at EY, and he was telling me how he would do the recruitment, and he would get these kids that, did beautifully on those external exams. You can say, IB or whatever APs. But he was looking for, and I think this is one of the struggles some of the schools might have, is that alignment with real world skills. I look at my own and the needs of what's going on, the idea, and we've heard this so many times, collaboration, you hear them all the time, but I don't know if schools are we getting to the point where we're making that difference? Many schools are, which is positive, but how do you make the curriculum more aligned with the skills and knowledge that are needed, relevant for today? And I look at my own son. My son, he could not write a sentence. God, just don't ask him to write a sentence. But boy, this boy could collaborate. He was able to get people. He had such energy. In school, it struggled because it was definitely what he was able to produce. And I kept on telling him, honey, I told him he had a gift. Once you find someone who's going to take your gift, they're going to love it, rather than someone who's going to return a gift. And he just found a school, he found a métier for a job that he was able to just shine. So grant you, he is 27, and I know things have gotten much better in terms of school aligning the curriculum with the current needs and skill set for today. I think that's one challenge many schools are doing, maybe because they're still latching on to traditional curriculum and they don't know how to navigate to be more differentiated or to respond to global issues that are happening. We have so much going on in the world right now. How do we stop what we're doing and make children more aware of it? And why are we doing it?
I think that in a way, you speak beautifully about this. One of the things we were talking about in the book is we were trying to wrap our heads around certain terminology to define and clarify it. And you certainly picked up on the authentic assessment piece. You were also picking up on the elements in a story, like the genre notion and the idea. We talked about the setting, that and set curriculum in disciplines, interdisciplinary or phenomena-based, which is what you just really were pointing at, which is immediate, real life, real world, whether it's personal for the student or local or global. And I'm wondering, it sounds to me like what you're, I mean, I don't want to over assume, but it feels to me like what you were just getting at is there needs to be more phenomena-based learning, more room. There's some great classical curriculum out there.
Absolutely.
But am I correct in hearing? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at what are the skills needed for today's workplace, and also allowing differentiation. There are some schools where maybe they only have one pathway for a student, let's say in the secondary school. Maybe it's not the pathway of that child, but how do we get those adaptation of teaching materials to be current, to be more globally minded? That I would say is a challenge for many schools when looking at the curriculum, but also it's due to a pressure from parent groups because they want those external grades. When you look at some getting entry into university, unfortunately with some schools, it's the entry, it's a certain amount of points you receive for the IB. So it's trying to balance out the pressure of trying to get your child into a certain university, so they have to get a certain amount of points, versus really what's best for that child's and who they are as a learner. It's a balancing act. For many parents, they want them to get to university, but you need that many points if it was IB. But then the other side is that really what is best for my child? And what else does the school have to offer? It's a difficult balance.
It is. And I think one thing that is important is to eventually what we're looking at is having students create their own storyboards about their own journey. And on that pathway. Yeah. So let me, if I might just ask you what fascinates you right now, just personally in terms of your, I don't need to know, though I'd be kind of curious to know what you're reading personally, what books you got going, but I mean, what sort of intrigues you? Because you've got such a vibrant and alive and alert mind, and people just respond so well to you. I'm just curious what intrigues you. Any aspect?
It's actually this. I love the idea of facilitation, virtual versus on-site. I think COVID elevated that point when many people who were used to presenting on site had to go virtual, and it wasn't as effective. And it's a different ecosystem when you are learning online. So I love the idea of what leaders should know as facilitators. Are they modeling an inquiry-based approach when meeting with their staff? And are they modeling the skill set that they expect their teachers to be in terms of elevating collective voice, elevating equal voice, decision-making processes? Are you transparent? So facilitation to me is a passion. I just love learning about it because it's so new. Like when I first became an assistant principal, I didn't take a course on facilitation or how to run a meeting 101. You just told, you have to do a meeting, do it. But I love the dynamics behind it. Because you think about how much wasted time. When people say they're going to a meeting, do they go, yes, I can't wait for this meeting at 3:30 on a Wednesday till 5 o'clock. Yes, I can't wait. We have so much wasted time and resources. So that's been I have to admit, it is a passion of mine. I study it. I have books. I do anything I can to learn more of facilitating virtually and on site to make sure that when someone enters a workshop, they leave with that takeaway. They feel like their time has been validated and respected within whatever time I was able to have the privilege of having and working with them. So I have to admit, and I just love it. It's something I think it's great to study, and anybody can do it, but it does take that intentionality. You have to study it, looking at dynamics, body language, everything. So that's my latest passion.
Well, Nancy, there is no wonder that you are so well regarded and sought after, and as our mutual friend Show from India,
we love Donald
from Chapters International, said that you were positively a magnet. And I can see it. I guess if I had a meeting at 3:30 and you were running it, I'd be pretty excited. I want to just ask, and we can certainly post it too, people may have questions for you. So what's the best way to reach you? Should we just post you? Would you prefer LinkedIn or?
Yeah, LinkedIn is great. Just connect with me on LinkedIn. Also, my email address is on LinkedIn as well. So I'm always love to meet new people and just learn what they're doing in their schools. And I think that's one of the benefits that I get when working with the school. I always see it as a reciprocal learning opportunity. Yes, I go in and share, but I also go in and learn how they just elevate teacher voice. And then obviously those conversations impact student achievement. So I just love that energy. I think it's a privilege to be able to go into schools and learn that way. So I feel very fortunate.
Well, Nancy, thank you. And thank you to our listeners, and hope to have a conversation again with you. Really
I love this. What a privilege to be here with you, Heidi. Loved it. Bye, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.